Fabulous. Um, Welcome everyone to Brain Northwest programming. Today we have our wonderful Karen Sumption with us again, continuing this important series on holding the grief that can happen after experiencing a brain injury, ambiguous loss, really finding naming names for some of the things we experience can really be grounding and centering. Karen has a rich experience as a certified peer counselor, also, yes, certified health worker and certified victim advocate. She has had extensive work experience in working with folks in challenging places and transitions in their lives and brings that sincerity and that dynamic growth that she experiences in that space to these classes. Um, and so I'm very thankful to have you here again, Karen, and I will let you take it away.
Hi, everybody. I see a few faces and names that I recognize. Welcome. I'm Karen Sumption, and this is kind of part two of our grief series. And so, sort of the slides slash me talking part is a little bit shorter to give more time for discussion. And those of you that have attended my classes in the past, some of these concepts are going to start to be very familiar to you. But today, we're going to talk about mourning identity. And so this is part two. Who am I now? I turn off my camera as I'm presenting. So, as Reggie said, you are welcome to be on or off camera. So, I'm going to get, there we go. Yeah, let's get started. And you may also hear thunder from behind me as well. And right now my cat is resting relatively quietly, but we you may hear a an an angsty meow here and there. So just to dive in, the idea of who you were before an injury and who you are now post-injury is really, really common. And struggling with the idea of who you were and who you are now, because there can be a really big difference in things that affect how you both identify and define yourself and what your role is in your community, in your family, and sort of in the greater world. Because an acquired or traumatic brain injury can affect your ability to process or control or understand your emotions. It can affect your memory. It can affect your physical ability. It can affect how fatigued you get, how quickly you get fatigued, which can affect how you participate in activities of daily living. And that can be anything from your job now, what your job was, to even just keeping house, doing laundry, brushing your teeth. And these things can look really, really different for folks before injury and after injury. And so an injury to the brain can disrupt how you define yourself. I want to talk just a minute about identity and the self. Just those are really vague, common like words, and they're very abstract. And just to sort of attempt to make what I'm addressing a little bit more concrete, identity and the self are fluid constructs. So these are things that we build and rebuild, change and revise over time. These are not static. You may have a static idea of who you are, but all the different components that go into how you define yourself and how others define you are things that are constantly changing, injury or no injury. Your identity and yourself encompasses aspects, lots and lots of aspects. This is a not exhaustive list. It could be you define part of yourself, you define through what you do for work, or what you do as a hobby, what religion you were raised as, what religion you are now, where you were born, where you live now, what your ethnicity is, what your race is, what your gender is, your sexuality, your education level, your age, your political beliefs, your marital status. There's so many different aspects that can go into your idea of the self and your identity. Your self and identity also includes your self-image, right? This is the mental picture that you have of yourself. And this can encompass both physical traits, right? I'm tall, I'm short, I'm fat. But it can also be things that you know about yourself because of judgments you've made, comments people have made to you, memories, and the norms of our culture and our society. So I'm shy, right? I'm a good writer. I'm a bad writer. I'm a slow reader. I can't dance. I'm very handsome, right? These are all um things that you understand about yourself because you've gotten input from the world, either society, individuals, or yourself. And these are judgments you've made about you. I've used this diagram a few times, and this sort of goes a little bit deeper into what I just talked about. Again, not exhaustive, right? But this graphic also includes things like economics, the economic class you were born into, whether you have access to generational wealth, how financially literate you are, what your preferences are, right? What kind of food do you like? What kind of music do you like? What kind of hobbies do you like? Are you a hiker? Are you an indoorsy person? Your experiences also, again, education and employment, absolutely, but also your immigrant status, whether you have military experience. And your physical and mental health. You may have an acquired or traumatic brain injury, but you also may have other diagnoses or things about you that were true and diagnosed before the injury or post the injury. Also, habits. Are you a smoker? Are you a drinker? Um, Values. I mentioned religion and I mentioned political, but it could also be just creeds that you live by, your philosophies. And of course, your family, right? Were your parents were your parents married? Were you raised in a single parent household? Were you raised by folks that were not your biological parents? Are you the oldest child in the family? Are you the only girl? These are all different aspects that go into you self-constructing your idea of self and your identity. So, some common emotional themes that researchers and healthcare practitioners have identified from folks in recovery from brain injury about identity. These can include ambiguity, right? I'm grateful to be alive, but I miss the old me. And really, it's less ambiguity and more the true definition, the true dictionary definition of ambivalence, when you can hold two different feelings at the same time. So you can be grateful that you are here and that your injury was not fatal, but you can also have a lot of sorrow that the injury happened. Isolation. No one understands what it's like. You can tell people what it's like. You can attempt to tell people what it's like. You can try to express yourself using language or using visuals or music or any other means of self-expression, but you can feel like even those closest to you, even the folks that see you every day, sometimes minute to minute, close family members, spouses, parents, still don't completely understand exactly what it is that you're living with. Perfectionism. Now, survivors of injury are not the only people to participate in perfectionism, but if I can't do things exactly like I did before, then I failed. I can't do them anymore at all, period, end of statement. And there's definitely an idea that you used to be able to operate at a certain level, right? You knew what you could do in a day. You could go to work, you could pick up the kids, you could make dinner, whatever it was. That was something that you were able to do in a day and sustain over the course of a week. That may not be true anymore. And so if you may feel like I can't operate at that same level, so I'm operating at zero. And then the positive aspects of surviving injuries is I've discovered strengths I never knew I had. A lot of times folks talk about renewing their value system, finding gratitude, finding that there is pleasure in being able to slow down. You have to opt out of sort of the very frantic, manic pace of modern life. And being forced to opt out is actually brings a lot of pleasure with it. Um, some folks have renewed their faith. Some are able to spend more time with people that they love, or just discover resilience that they never knew that they had because it wasn't something that they tapped into in the past. But recognizing any and all of these buckets is just, these are normal responses to change. It's not an evidence of failure. Understanding that these are all completely normal, understandable feelings that happen in regard to any significant change is a step in psychological healing. And the truth is, we have already all been many, many versions of ourselves before the injury. And folks who are living without injury are also continually encompassing many, many, many versions of themselves. I wanted to be and was a lot of different things when I was a child, when I was a teenager, when I was in my 20s, when I was in my late 20s, when I was in my 30s, as I changed careers, as I became a college graduate, as I entered the workforce, as I got married, as I changed so many of those parts of my identity that were not static. Because remember, that whole list of, let me go back to it, all of these components of identity, some of them are unchanging, right? We can't change our family of origin. We can't change our ethnicity or our race. We can't change necessarily our access to generational wealth, but many of these, they're not static. They change throughout our lives. We can change religions. We can become more religious. We can become less observant. We can convert. We can start our lives believing in some really significant causes and dedicate some time and money and effort. And then as we move through life, our dedication to those causes can change significantly. Our weight, our age can change. Our age does change. Our marital status can change. Our position in the family can change. As we grow older, those of us that were not the elders in the family, we eventually become the elders in the family. Society changes. Societies change significantly in the conversations that we're able to have with one another about identity, particularly around gender and appearance and sexual preference. Our experiences with education and employment can change. And of course, our personal preferences, right? We can love a food and just not love it anymore or get sick of it. We can find new favorites. We can try new hobbies. We can get introduced to new musical tastes. So lots and lots of these things, they're a snapshot of where you are at that particular moment, but they're not static. They're part of the growing story of who you are that is part of your identity. But you need to remember that even without an injury, our identities are always changing, always being revised. And you're not bound by your old stories, just as anybody's not bound by their old stories. It can be difficult to decide, I really was into X. I'm not as into X anymore. And maybe in your family, you're known as the expert on that. And every holiday you get presents around that thing. And it can be uncomfortable to step into new interests and get accustomed to being able to then say, yeah, I like that. I'm not that person anymore. But we shed identities that once seemed so integral to who we are when they no longer are important to who we are. And so the discussion I wanted to hold was, let's give ourselves permission to hold multiple versions of ourselves at once. So before injury, I was blank. Now I'm blank. We're still those people, though we haven't fundamentally changed. Our sense of I is the same, but perhaps the way we define that I, the most important components to it have changed. And it's also okay to feel some sorrow. This series is about grief. And just as you may grieve things that were easy before the injury, so we all grieve things that were easy when we were younger. Just to give a personal example, um, I don't know if anybody here really uses social media very much. I keep an eye on things because I like to know what the kids are doing. And on TikTok, not that long ago, there was something called the cartwheel challenge. And the cartwheel challenge was the younger folks, like 20 years and younger, challenging the older folks, like me, 50 plus, to could we still do a cartwheel or skip if you couldn't cartwheel? Because almost all of us at some point when we were little, if we had the ability, skipped. If you had the physical ability to do so, when we were little, we skipped and we just knew how to skip. Well, it's been a while since I've done a cartwheel and I don't want to break my neck, so I didn't do the cartwheel. But I thought to myself, of course, of course I can skip. Of course. I used to skip all the time. I know how to skip. I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Can't remember how to do it. Can't make my legs do it. Can't do it. I I I'm trying. Like I actually have been trying to reteach myself how to skip. But at some point there was a day that was the last day I skipped, and I have never skipped again until I just saw this challenge and tried to make myself skip, and I lost it. And so I lost something I didn't even know that I lost. And I'm still mourning that. I'm mourning that. And with that, it doesn't have anything to do with injury, actually. For me, my neurodiversity is not injury based, but it does have to do with aging and losing the ability to play and really having a nostalgic look back at childhood. And so these are things that can appear about our identity at any point. And so big, small, do I really want to skip? I don't know. Would my life be better if I could skip now? Probably not. But the fact that I can't skip has been has been really, really weirdly significant to me. And I've held on in a way that I can't quite verbalize to you all because again, that isolation, right? I don't know that not everybody's gonna understand, but I feel like that story can hold some weight because you're probably, as you're moving through life, randomly finding things that you have lost. And it doesn't necessarily need to be things that you have lost through injury. They could just be through, that's not my life anymore. I don't do that anymore. I haven't talked to that person, whatever. And when it hits you, it is that strange little flash of grief because without realizing it, I have to revise my identity as somebody who can't skip. So
I love that you shared that. I'm going to stop the recording so other people can share. And now I want to see if I can skip. I'm going to be doing that. You can know that I'm going to be
I'm
trying it.
so, let me know.
I
Like if
will.
you try skipping and you can do it, it's about 50-50, I guess,
Okay.
is what at least if
Hmm.
that's what it's seeming like from social media. About 50% of people are like, "Oh yeah, I can do this." And then 50% like, "Wait, why my I can't do it."
Coordinate.
It's yeah.